Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking loan fraud. Bankers, public officials, and borrowers who got caught. 2025, first show of the year. Time for a Kris Roglieri update. Delaney, Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy
Tell
New
us
Year,
about Kris
everybody.
Roglieri. Tell us how we got here today.
Well, actually, this started back in December 2023, correct?
Wow.
Some of this coming out, so it's been a little while, but Roglieri
I'm gonna stop you there, and you're right. It's only been a year. And what's amazing about this is usually these fraud cases move at a glacial pace.
Yeah.
And but Lance, that's not the case here. We had an inkling of that, and before we knew it, lawsuits were being filed, people were being laid off, and Kris ended up in jail.
Yeah, this is a much more complicated story than your typical fraud story that we see.
Right, absolutely. Go ahead, Delaney, set us up.
Well, to summarize on the more criminal side, he was indicted back in May 2024 with 5 counts of wire fraud. This was all connected to a Minnesota egg farm. It was for a $100 million loan, and they're saying that he allegedly stole $5 million from them.
Wow.
And this is, of course, among several other civil lawsuits with more than a dozen companies for similar claims.
Yeah, the Minnesota egg people are out $5 million. But the total amount of the fraud, remind me, Delaney, how much are the feds or the receiver thinks that are missing?
Well, on the other side of things, I think the estimate is above 200 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm still patiently waiting to see how this may work out on the criminal side, whether some of these other companies will eventually be attached to this case or not.
Delaney, usually when you have a white collar crime, which is what this, what loan fraud is, the defendant is out, usually on personal reconnaissance. Yeah. He's not deemed a threat to society. That's not the case here, is it?
Absolutely not, and not without fighting. He's made several attempts to be released, and they have all been turned down. That was actually where we left off last time in November 2024. He had filed another motion to open a detention hearing, which did take place, and the court finds the defendant to not be a risk of flight, but does find him to continue to be a danger to the community. After arguments were heard during the renewed detention hearing, the court finds that the defendant remains a danger to the community for the reasons stated at the conclusion of the hearing, and he will remain detained in the custody of the U.S. Marshal pending trial.
I have a question. Let me go to Lance first. Lance, how many, in your experience, I know you're dealing with a lot of fraud cases. How many of these defendants are in jail awaiting trial?
Typically none.
None, yeah.
most are released, but as Delaney could probably share with you, I think Kris made some threatening texts.
Well, that was my next question. Why? Yeah, go ahead, Delaney. Why did the court determine that, no, we're not going to let this man out? What did he do?
Well, as he mentioned, there were some threats to FBI agents, and that was paired with all of the guns and various things they found at his house. So between threatening to shoot an FBI agent and having all of the objects to do so, that is what led to his detainment.
I want to make a statement here. Both Lance and I know Kris. Lance and I have traveled to his conferences. We have both been speakers at his events. We know him well. This is a tragic situation for him and his family. And there are no winners here, unfortunately. But Lance, go ahead.
The crazy thing about this, Bob, is throughout my career, my first job after I finished my MBA was with the FDIC. And one of the first projects I worked on was some forensic accounting related to a loan officer who had committed fraud and was stealing money from the financial institution. But the numbers are a little different, guys. This guy stole I don't remember the exact amount, but was not even $100,000 back in the day. What has happened is, these cases have gotten extremely large. In the case of Kris Roglieri, he was taking fees from prospective borrowers and promising financing, and they were not your typical fee. On an SBA loan has a limit of $30,000. On the egg farm, what did he take, Delaney? $5 million?
$5 million.
Yeah.
Lance, I spoke at an event in Vegas last year, and I talked to several people who Kris had approached to participate in the Ponzi scheme. And they were very, very emotional about that interaction. And they felt, I'm not going to use the term, but they felt violated, and that Kris would jeopardize their own personal financial and their family's financial future with that. So this is a very serious case. A lot of people are getting hurt. Kris isn't. Everyone he meets, Kris, you like him. He's a nice guy.
Oh yeah.
But he got himself in a situation where a lot of bad things happen. Please, if you're new to this YouTube video, go back and see our previous reporting. But bring us up to date, Delaney. Let's get out of ancient history and talk about where we are today.
Well, on Pacer, it does say that the final pretrial conference is set for May 13th, 2025. And besides this, there has been a little bit of movement in his civil forfeiture case. So his attorneys were able to reach a settlement. They're going to be selling off a portion of his sports car collection to benefit his creditors and pay off some of his bills. They found that 4 of the cars aren't exactly connected to the criminal side of his case, so those are able to be taken and sold. They are alleging the rest of the cars may be part of the money laundering scheme, though.
Well, and to be clear, Kris isn't seeing any of this. There's simply a fight over who gets this,
who's going to get the money.
Yeah, who gets this, the creditors on the alleged Ponzi scheme or his personal bankruptcy. That's what they're fighting over. Kris is sitting in a county jail, and he's going to be there for a while. Go ahead.
Well, we've already seen a few of his cars auctioned off.
Yes,
but I do have
tell us
the
about
list
that.
of new cars that are being taken in this case.
Oh my
A
God.
2020 Lamborghini Aventador, a 2009 Mercedes-Benz SL65, a 2014 Mercedes-Benz SLS, and a 2015 Ferrari 458.
I know this is a sad case, and he's all his assets are being liquidated. His wife has filed for divorce, so it is it's not a pleasant thing. But again, and Lance and I, as we said, we know Kris. He's a nice guy, and you hate to see that happen to someone you know. But on the other side of the coin, there are people who are facing have lost their financial future, and that is devastating. And we cannot forget that.
You have employees that have lost their careers. They're possibly rebuilding it, but they were working somewhere. They were comfortable, well compensated, and they're no longer there. They've had to find other employment. You've also got various businesses throughout the country that, talk about the egg farm. They lost $5 million.
Yeah, and that is not going to be easily recouped. Delaney, excellent reporting. What are next steps?
Well, I will be keeping track of this. As I mentioned, the final pretrial meeting is supposed to be in May, so who knows? Maybe we'll see a trial sooner than we think.
Well, I know obviously his attorneys have filed at least 3 or 4 hearings to try to get him out. The judge has struck each one of those down. I know he's not getting out just because of the severity of the charges, and he's going to want to push for a speedy trial. But Lance, you've been involved with these as a banker in terms of liquidations are drawn out, and these are complicated and they're messy, right, Lance?
Yeah. Bob and Delaney, a simple foreclosure now can take as much as 6 to 8 months to get. So, a trial is complicated with as many moving pieces as this one, I mean, it's understandable that it's taking as long as it is. I would venture to say with that pretrial hearing in May, this may not be finished in 2025.
I have
I
no
would
inside
agree with that.
information, but I agree with you, Lance.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Well, very good. Final word, Delaney, is yours.
Well, you leave me with a tough one. Be smart and be safe. I hope everybody stays safe where they are with all the weather this weekend.
We'll take that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today for Fraud Fridays, so you can stop criminals from stealing from your bank.
Have a good weekend.